begin. So I would like to call this the South Burlington City Council meeting to order. It's at 6:32 and it is Monday, May 4th, 2020. The first item, we have a number of people. Let's see, I guess we only have one public member, well, two, Maddie Clark with the other paper and Barb Service from where it's nice and hot. And I'll let you know as more people come in, I guess. So our first item of the agenda, or item of business, is the agenda review. And are there any additions, deletions, or changes in order of the agenda items?
I have one, Helen.
Okay.
Would the council consider adding to the other business segment of the agenda the following: authorize the city manager to submit an application to the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank for voter authorized debt related to improvements at 180 Market Street.
That's the thing you had notified us about, right?
Yes.
It is.
Oh, sure.
Yes. Okay. Well, I don't see anyone opposing that, so we will add that to other business.
Great, thank you.
Any other additions, changes, or deletions? All righty, then we'll move on to 2 comments and questions from the public not related to the agenda. So Barb, anything cooking besides eggs on the sidewalk? No? Okay. So seeing no comments or questions from the public, we'll move on to announcements and the city manager's report.
Helen, I'm sorry, I was muted.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Barb.
I just want to say I want to go on record as saying I'm still not happy about the DRB, and I'll just leave it at that. Matt put out a statement today, and I think with the particular item, most of the items on the agenda are not objectionable, but I think there is huge reason to be concerned. I realize it was only a sketch plan, but there is huge reason to be concerned about the O'Brien Farms project going through while we are still using this medium.
Okay, noted. Thank you. Seeing no other public members wishing to speak, we'll move on to announcements and the city manager's report. So anyone, Tim, have you met as the pension committee or Green Mountain Transit?
Yeah. So the 2 members of the pension advisory board, 3 if you include Tom, were given a presentation by Pat Blizzard and is it John Waite? Tom, is that his name? Yeah, from SEI, and they went over the kind of current condition of the market and the balance of the fund, and they had some suggestions for some minor modifications to the allocations, and I think between Tom and Spencer and I, we were comfortable with that, and I think, Tom, we're going to move forward, or at least propose to the rest of the committee, right, of the board, to make a decision on that.
Went out to the full committee today.
Right.
So at the end of the
week.
Did
okay. I didn't get a chance to check email in the late afternoon. So I mean, as you know, the market has taken has made a generous correction to itself. Which is, I would say, completely caused by the pandemic and the complete stoppage of all business, which should have an impact on the market. And why we've seen a little rebound in the market last week is anybody's guess. Some people call it a dead thing bounce, and it happens from time to time when markets crash like that. So I guess we're just going to take those recommendations under consideration and probably approve those, but we'll have to talk about it. And then there were no other suggestions made for changes at this time, I guess. Tom, if you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, that was about it. Yeah.
So I have a question. Are the changes the percentages and the different types of funds or investment vehicles, or is it just within like the bonds that we hold or the market?
It was in fixed income, I believe, right, Tom?
Yes.
There were like
Yeah.
3 funds in fixed income, and one of them they thought was not very well strategically aligned for us. And so they wanted to dissipate that to a few other funds.
Okay.
Correct. Our 60-40 mix still stays the same.
Thank you. Okay, Green Mountain Transit, anything there?
So we have had actually 2 special meetings and we're having another one tomorrow. And this was in public session, but we have closed the general manager search, sadly, without a candidate. We had somebody, but then the world stopped turning, and it is now, we are now suspending the search as we get through this pandemic. And we are meeting tomorrow morning in another special meeting to discuss options, including a variety of different things that we'll be discussing. But the general manager, we will not be hiring a general manager, a permanent one, from the search process anytime soon.
Tom, did your
Okay,
candidates back out, or?
It's a little more complicated than that. So we had come around with a final candidate, and then it's hard to get into the specifics, but I'd happy to speak with you as the alternate if you want offline. But with the pandemic, nobody was really ready to move or move across the country. And
Okay.
so we are now weighing additional options, and that's what our meeting tomorrow morning is about.
So just complete logistical complications caused by the pandemic. I understand. Yeah.
Indeed.
Okay, and for the public, that was Tom Chittenden. I should call on you by name. I'm sorry. Anyone else? The Airport Commission did not meet. Kevin and I actually met with the library board chair and the librarian, and she shared with us a wonderful proposal to begin starting, I guess, tomorrow, curbside library pick up and drop off, I guess. So you can call in or email, I think, and ask for however many books you want. I can't remember if there's a limit. And they can pull them for you, put them in a bag with your name on them, and there'll be a cart out the back door, kind of near the book drop. And you can go and get your bag, or you can request that library personnel deposit the bag in your trunk or your back seat or something. So I was happy to hear that, because and the book drop box will be open as well. So I think that's a nice, and interestingly and importantly, I think Jennifer laid out 3 proposals of sort of slowly getting back to an open library, which I think made a whole lot of sense to look at those ahead of time so that we get an understanding. And I was impressed that she was really thinking ahead about, so we could get much more opened up. You know, the spigot could turn a couple more turns throughout the summer, but then in September, October, November, we could spike again, and you have to turn it off. So there would be a process to sort of back down the way the library is open to the public.
Helen, when they do open the library to the public to some degree, is there going to be a requirement to wear masks?
Well, that would be my preference, and I think that is a city. Kevin, you were going to look into that. We were going to find out from the governor if he was going to make it a requirement, but I think we felt, I don't know if you got a legal opinion, that as a city we could make that requirement.
Yeah, I sent you out, I think I sent you out something from Andrew on Friday. We'll come back to that under that part of the agenda, Tim.
Okay.
About
did I miss it?
Masks in public and also in city-owned buildings. So
okay. Yeah, under
we'll come back.
item 9.
Yes, item 9.
Okay. And then I think on the front porch I know on the front porch forum, there's been an announcement that the library will be offering this service. A number of other libraries in the area have offered it, and I think it was very well thought out, and the processes are in place with how the staff cleans after themselves and wears masks and really is very careful as they work in the library to pull these volumes. They also decided that any returned books would be left untouched for 72 hours and then would be restocked and available to the public. While that's probably longer than is necessary, that's what the staff was comfortable with, so we can be sure that if there are any germs on the books, they would be dead by then. So that was a happy meeting. I was really pleased about that. City manager.
Thanks, Helen. I just have a few things. Just immediately prior to the meeting, I sent you all a note from Paul that I received. Paul received notice, and Paul's on the meeting right now. Paul received notice from the City of Burlington's Planning and Zoning Office that a application has been received by that office for a change of use at the Burton facility. So you'll have that from Paul or from me, but from Paul in your email.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, the note is that we probably have time for the council to consider what you would like to do in regard to that, but I wanted to make sure that you saw that. I suspect you'll want to have a discussion about that at your next meeting. Paul, if you have any additional comments on that, you're on the line here too. So.
Sure. Just to report that what my counterpart Scott Gustin told me was that it would be scheduled likely for July in front of their development review board. So it is timely but not urgent.
Okay. Thank you.
In addition, Tom and I participated in the bi-weekly managers meeting with, I'm sorry, Megan. I didn't see your hand.
Megan.
That's all right. Yeah, I just was curious if there would be a traffic study that came along with that, if there was access to the traffic study.
Hi, Megan. Yes, we have the full, all of the materials that were provided to the City of Burlington, we have a copy of. So we have both the full traffic study as well as the full traffic study with all of the appendices to it. They're large files, so I can't just email them, but certainly any counselor that wants, we could figure out a way to get it into the box, and any citizen who'd like a copy of it, we can figure out through one of the Box or Dropbox, one of those services. But we do have all of it.
I'd be interested in a copy.
Yeah, I
And-
would.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think the public, there certainly are quite a few residents who would be very interested. And if we're going to have a full discussion as a council about what we want to do, we probably ought to see what they're asking to do prior to that discussion.
Okay, we'll figure out a way to get that to each council member.
Thank you.
The information somehow.
Yeah.
Anything else on that?
Oh, Tom has a question. Tom Chittenden.
Well, Megan's question raised another question that maybe you're going to speak to, Kevin, but do you have anything to update on the traffic light synchronization topics down Dorset Street? Is there anything to offer about efforts collaborating with Healthy Living and so on with the concerns about the lights, or did I miss a memo on that topic?
Justin's online here, though. Justin might have an update on that, if that's okay, Helen.
That's fine. Justin?
Healthy Living offered, and we took them up on
Justin, you're really low. Can you up your volume, please?
How's this? Any better?
No.
It's low, but I can hear you.
Really use your outdoor voice. We should be able to hear you.
Okay. Next attempt. been working in every other forum, so I apologize for it not working here. Paul, you're muted if you're trying to.
We can hear you.
We can hear you. Just speak very loudly, Justin.
Okay. So we had, Kevin and I had spoken to Healthy Living, and we had agreed to take them up on their offer to fund some kind of phase one, if you will, work. We gave them a list of folks that we would recommend they approach. And this was probably early calendar year. And I have not heard back from them on, again, shortly thereafter, things kind of slowed down a bit, obviously, but I have not heard back from them if they engaged anyone, and no one has been in touch with us as they normally would, just to get existing information. So I can reach back out to them to see if they've taken any movement on this, or if it's been backburnered like a lot of other items.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Likewise, if I might build off of what Justin just said, in a slightly reversed way, you'll recall some months ago, citizens from Pinnacle approached the city about some stormwater pond issues that they had. Justin and Tom looked at their budget, their stormwater budget, and offered to cover costs associated with an independent engineer to evaluate the stormwater system of the neighbors' choosing. And I had the sense that they were reaching out. We had given them a group of 4 or 5, I think, engineers who could do that kind of work. And similarly, we're waiting to hear back on that, but that's been 2 or 3 months now as well. Anyway, we offered to finance that cost to review that stormwater system, and we'll see where that goes. So
That's an engineering review?
yes, of the design of the ponds and the structures. Let's see where, so Tom and I were involved in the managers meeting on Wednesday of last week. We had the best turnout we've ever had. It was electronic, as it turns out, but all the other managers are pretty much facing the same things. 90% of the conversation was about budgets and impacts. So we are clearly not alone in this. Everybody's facing the same issues. And the education fund issue, which Tom will speak to later on tonight, is pretty eminent concern of ours. And it's a very costly concern as well. But Tom will speak to that in his report later on tonight. The last thing I have, I'm going to be the guest speaker at Rotary on Thursday. So I'm looking forward to that. All the other things that we've been involved in are really pretty much C19 oriented. And so I will cover all that under item 9 on the agenda tonight. That's all I've got, Helen.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, anyone? Any additional questions? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. There are quite a few items. Consider and sign the disbursements, approve the FY21 Unified Planning Work Program request to CCRPC, a state class 2 paving application, approve the highway impact fee credit for 1068 Williston Road, and the final, approve the 2020 build grant application to fund the I-89 exit 14 pedestrian bicycle bridge connection.
I'll move to approve. This is
I'll
Megan.
Second,
And that was Dave seconding, correct? Dave
correct.
Kaufman. Okay. You ready for that vote, or do you have comments or questions?
One comment from me.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Mike,
Go ahead.
quick one, and maybe it's wasting our time, but I noticed the letter to Secretary Chow is in there twice. Was I missing something, or are they 2 different
Yeah.
letters? It was hard to compare the 2, but we're only sending 1 letter to the Transportation Secretary. Is that right?
It's only 1 letter. It must have somehow gotten in there twice, Tom.
All right, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay.
One
Jim
might be
Barrett?
PDF, one might be a Word. So
And we don't really have a chance in Hades of getting this grant. I mean, in lieu of the budget blowout that's happening in Washington this year and probably next year too, right? But we have to go through the motion.
Yeah, we need to go through the motion, but, and it's as Alana explained in her, memo, it's a highly competitive grant, but we've got a lot of things going for us in as much as it's reasonably, shovel ready. Certainly by Vermont standards. So, and this is the third year we've applied on something that's pretty much dead center on what the program is set up to do. I don't know if Paul and Justin want to comment on that at all, but this is really what the Bill grant is all about. Oh, Alana's online now too, so Alana might want to speak to that.
Alana, would you like to speak?
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry, I don't know where my camera is. I know there's a setting there I can adjust, but I'll find it before other items. But there's, it's a grant application. You never know if you'll receive it. And now we've had 2 years of feedback, and we'll just try our hardest to get it. It is probably, a 5 to 8% chance for it's a very competitive grant. But, there's different buckets, and it's just, who's applying in a given year for which bucket of the grant. And so we'll see.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, moved and seconded. You ready for the vote? All in favor? Let me call the roll. Tom Chittenden,
Aye.
Megan Emery,
Aye.
Dave Kaufman,
Aye.
Tim Barrett,
Aye.
and Helen really votes aye. So the consent agenda passes 5-0. The next item is update on the school district draft FY 2021 budget. Is David Young on board yet?
I'm not seeing David on yet, Helen.
Okay. Well, why don't we skip that and go on to, Charlie Baker is on.
Charlie's on.
Is that okay with everyone if we wait until David gets online and then go back to that?
I see the letter D, but it's not David.
No, that's Doug somebody.
Okay, got it. Sorry.
Helen, look at item 7. That only might take a few minutes.
Oh, well, that's a good idea. Are we okay to go down to 7?
Sure.
Looks
All
like
right,
it, yeah.
so let's,
Oh, yeah.
okay, so this is discuss and possibly appoint a South Burlington representative to the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission Board of Commissioners. And as we all received and know, our current representative is Chris Shaw. He's very interested in continuing. And this is more a question, would we like to have him continue, or do you wish to open this up to other public members to apply and make a decision a little bit later?
I move we reappoint Chris Shaw right now.
I'll second.
Okay, is there any further discussion?
And thank him for doing a good job.
Yes, I think he's done a great job, and I think there's continuity in that's important for our city and relationship with the CCRPC. So I will call the roll. Megan Emery.
Aye.
Let's see who's next. Dave Kaufman
Yes, aye.
and Tom Chittenden
Aye.
and Tim Barrett.
Aye.
And Helen really is an aye. So we've reappointed Chris Shaw for, I guess it's just a year, right? It's every
2 years.
year? Oh, 2 years. So a 2-year appointment to CCRPC. Well, thank you. David Young on yet? No. Well, why don't we go to Charlie Baker?
How long will it take you, Kevin, to do the update on COVID-19?
It'll probably take 20 minutes or so, Dave. We got to talk about a policy issue about masks tonight, and
Okay. How about the
Well, how
name?
about the council review and discussion of process to establish names on city buildings?
Sure.
Is that
Great.
okay? All right, so we'll move down to item 8, and Alana Blanchard is going to, she had some information for us and she's going to run through that, if she will.
So good evening. So 180 Market Street is back under construction, and we're moving forward with the placement of steel once it arrives. So the first section of steel that will be placed is along the front of the building, and right after that will be the granite over the entry. So the architecture team has been reviewing the granite, and part of the entry will be the signage for the building. And so at the in the next month, it would be important to know what the name is so that the sign can be designed, and then the electricity, which will light up the sign through a hole in the granite, can be a hole can be placed in the granite, and we'd like that hole to go in before it gets placed on the building. So at this time, it would be very helpful to have a name for the building. And I know that the agenda item says process. So we're, open to either you selecting a name or developing a process either way. And just as an aside, the library is officially the South Burlington Public Library. And then other sort of naming opportunities that I believe that the Library Foundation is working on would be to through a donor process would be potentially the auditorium and also the senior center, if there was a donor that wanted to name those buildings, which I believe they've already discussed with you. But the front of the building would be the appropriate place for the name for the building, and potentially the rear of the building also. And I think, so Paul has the drawing up, and the yellow area on the lowest image, that's the area where the sign would be. And just across that full face, and that's both a railing and then the sign area.
So where would the library's name be? Inside?
So the library's name would be inside, and there are also locations for banners along the the east face of the building, vertical banners that hang out from the building. So while they wouldn't necessarily have the name of the library, they might announce library type things, or they could be the name of the library potentially on a temporary basis. And then the library also has a lot of glass on the front of it. So there's a lot of opportunity there to put signage related to the library within that glass area. And then
So what would the phrasing be? Would it be like the Ernest J. Borgnine something, 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 something? Or
How'd you come up with that, Tim?
Or just the South Burlington Community Center.
would it say the Ernest J. Borgnine Community Center, or
whatever?
Well, it could be the Tim Barrett with enough money.
how much? How much?
I don't know.
7 figures,
10
Tim.
million would probably do it.
Yeah,
7?
exactly. Well, as I recall, and Tom Hubbard, you're more familiar with this than I, there was a process to rename the Dorset Park. And that was a committee, and they generated suggestions, and then that board selected one. Is that right?
They actually had a resolution drafted, which the council approved.
City council, right.
Yeah, there's also the example of City Center Park. And that was through the Recreation and Parks Committee.
Right. So is that a process that we like, or as a council, do we just want to name it the South Burlington Community Center? Just name it what it is. Kevin?
Well, because we've been years it's Dave, maybe because we've been years in the making on this, and it is our city center, maybe it should say South Burlington, something like South Burlington City Center Community Building. And then under that, City Hall, South Burlington Public Library.
The
That's
only
nice.
thing, the only thing about not including city center is so that it belongs to all of South Burlington, right?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, but City Center says what it is.
Well, I don't think we're at the right spot tonight
No,
be throwing out names and come to a decision. I was
No,
looking
no.
for a process so that we could generate either names from the council members, the public, and then we could look at them at a future date and have a discussion and make a decision.
Kevin, what's
Maybe
our
we need-
timeline on this? They say sooner rather than later, but sooner, is that a month or 6 months?
Alana,
I would say about a month to a month and a half. A month
That's pretty quick.
is enough time to design it well.
So we have a month. So if we decide by June 1st, that would be okay?
probably your first meeting in June, Helen.
Okay. That's okay with me. What does the council think about the process? How do you want to go about eliciting names from the public?
Is this something that the Public Art Committee could take under consideration?
So
Well, let's back up a second, because if there is a benefactor in the city who would like to contribute a significant amount of money,
Mhm.
that could be a good reason to put their name on the building, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, good point.
So I mean, as long as it's somebody that, you know, that we all appreciate in their offer and are willing to do that, because eventually we have to vote on it, right? It's city
Right.
council decision what that name is.
Kevin,
So-
can we accept money from the public for naming this building? I thought there were some
Sure.
TIF rules that maybe didn't make that
No, you can,
quite. You can.
you can
Okay.
accept, you can set the standard for what you would allow for naming rights on the building. You've discussed that in prior meetings, maybe 18 months ago.
Yeah.
But I would suggest that you would need something around 7 figures to get there.
This is probably the worst time to go out for 7 figures.
Not unless you're trying to take a capital gains loss and stretch it over 3 years.
Yeah,
Well, yeah.
That was just a joke. It was a bad joke. But this is a really serious
Yeah.
thing that has to be decided, and it's an opportunity to honor a really important person in the city's history that everybody enjoyed or still enjoys, whether they make a contribution or not, whether they're alive or not. I mean, there are all those possibilities for names. So the process has got to generate a bunch of suggestions, and then they have to be funneled down into a few, and then we have to vote on them, I guess, right?
I guess I would
Right.
prefer, if we're going to choose somebody, I would prefer someone who's no longer with us. I don't know. It's just looking, I just happened to be studying this with regard to a road in Germany named after a French singer. And I was looking through the kind of the naming process, and it seems that roads in France and in Germany can only be named for people who have passed on, which I thought was, I think, appropriate. Yeah.
I think that you guys should really consider if you don't have a major donor to put the name up, you need to think of something more direct, like the South Burlington Community Center or something like that. Naming rights are huge fundraising tools that you can use for any public building, but it doesn't appear that the library has been very successful in even getting even remotely close to a significant enough figure to justify it.
I agree with Kevin. I think it's a name. If somebody puts what we decide is a bottom line bunch of money, you know, like $5 million, which would be almost 25% of the cost of the building, would certainly be a huge help. Otherwise, I suggest we come up with an appropriate community name. Every time we talk about it, we say community and we say center. So probably those words should be incorporated, and let's give it some thought and discuss it further, maybe a little longer at our next meeting so that we can come close. But I don't think we should put somebody's name on the building unless there's one heck of a big chunk of money that comes with it.
Yeah.
Well, if we
One
only have a
question,
month. Go ahead,
sorry.
Tim.
Ilana,
go ahead.
is the sign going to be like a piece of metal that's got cutouts, and then the light bulb or the lighting is behind it?
So it hasn't been designed yet, but likely either the lighting would be behind each individual letter, or would be would be in front of the letters, lighting up the face.
Oh, I see.
It's not going to be engraved in the granite?
Not engraved in the granite.
Well, then at least it could be changed someday down the line.
If you could have individual backlighting for every letter that could be LED light controlled, and we can change the hues as we wish, that would be beautiful.
That would be cool. Yeah.
Write the check.
Well,
Maybe.
so it sounds like, since we haven't really landed on anything, it might be best to consider this at our next meeting. And who would like to, I mean, can we ask you, Kevin, or Alana, to come up with a process that you think makes sense?
Sure.
I mean, personally, I would love to have a benefactor, but I just don't see how we actually go about accomplishing that in less than a month.
I don't think you're gonna, Helen, but the bottom line is if you get a 7-figure donor, we'll change the sign.
Yep, we could do that.
Good point.
Yeah.
And the lights might be a little funky, but they still might work.
They still might work. Yeah.
I mean, we can keep it simple as well. We're not going to get in trouble with South Burlington Community Center.
No.
I mean, who could argue with that? If we want to get something a little glitzier, maybe we'll come up with it. But otherwise, South Burlington Community Center is exactly what we're building.
I think that the Barrett, Chittenden, Emory, Kaufman, Really Community Center.
We can do that too.
Chittenden's on enough stuff around here. You can
That
drop
was
the chip.
that was alphabetized, so you can't argue with the order.
Or we could do it by age.
Oh, okay.
So in order to, just in terms of process, it would be helpful to know if you would like us to go out and solicit names, recognizing that no committees are meeting, or very few committees are meeting currently. Or whether you would like a list of names to consider and discuss at the next meeting.
I think the latter would be good, personally.
Okay.
Any other comments?
I'm good with that.
Okay.
Great.
All right. And as you say, if we find a benefactor, we can change the name.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Has David Young joined us yet? No. Okay. Well, then let's go to Charlie Baker. Update and review of the timeline for the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission Interstate 89 Corridor Study. It's item 6 on the agenda.
Thank you very much.
Charlie, you want to?
Yes, thank you very much. So, yeah, I don't know how detailed you want to get. I went out here a number of months, but I really, I think more than anything, wanted to communicate how important it is to us at the Regional Planning Commission that we have a good process with the city to get input on both the Tilly Drive study, which is nearing completion, and then the bigger I-89 study that we're intending to go public with some more issues probably starting in June. And so I know it's a challenging time right now. I really wanted to, I guess, open up some conversation with the council about your thoughts about the best way to get, for us to seek input from the city and its residents, not just city council, but beyond city council as well. So I'm open to thoughts. I can go down the timeline if you'd like. This is all very optimistic scheduling. I'm not sure that the draft report for the Heinsberg Road Tilly Drive will be ready for your next meeting. That would probably be the earliest meeting it could be available as a draft.
Okay.
Helen?
Megan?
Yes, this is Megan, yes. Charlie, I attended the Winooski meeting, and I know there's one in South Burlington and in Williston as well, where members of the public gave input. Has there been any development of a plan based off of those meetings?
We are digesting that input and using that to, help guide the work. And so it's really, we're getting into the next steps, Megan, I guess, to answer that question more directly. And the next step you can see for the 89 study is really to start taking some of that input, which was a lot of what people wanted to see, or what they didn't like. We got a lot of generic input. We'll now start to look at some more detail, like what interchanges should we actually look at in more detail. So there's 7 potential interchanges and this is in addition to improving exit 14 that we're looking at. We're trying to narrow that down. We don't want to keep looking at a lot of detail for all 7 of them. We'd like to get another couple interchanges aside from exit 14 to look at in more detail. So that's really the next stage. We're trying to get that ready for review in about a month. And that's under review right now. And we're kind of working on the analysis work and how to present it best. So that's really the next step in the 89 study. And then from there, we get into the deeper dive into the potential interchange improvements to see which interchanges make sense to include in a larger package of investments in 89, but also in transit service, bike ped, maybe arterial improvements. So that's the longer picture. We're just kind of trying to paint here the step-by-step process, and also making sure there's a larger advisory committee for the 89 study that includes kind of natural resources people, Conservation Law Foundation, Vermont Natural Resource Council, the bike ped advocates, Local Motion, CATMA, GMT, and the business community. And I'm sure there's a whole cast of all the different perspectives we could think of on that advisory committee. At this point, and unless you think differently, we're trying to get input from the city of South Burlington prior to those advisory committee meetings, so that those individuals and those representatives can consider your input as they're trying to make decisions about what to move forward with.
Well, there was the map that we saw in the hold on, what was that first thing we passed? What's it called? Consent agenda, where we saw the streets, and it seemed like there were some potential ramps there for exit 12B. I don't know, you have it in the packet there, Paul. It was, what was it? What page was it?
It was the UPWP, Megan, I think.
Oh, yeah, it was that. I'm just trying to think of what page the map. Yeah, here it is. I have it on my iPad. Let's see, it was on page 20 of our packet. You got it. Yeah, so if you look at, it seemed like there were some roads there. I was really curious. Maybe, I don't know if this is appropriate for us to talk about this now, Charlie, if you just wanted us to look at the timeline and say this makes sense, and we'll talk more about this on June 1st.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that map is referencing or.
Hi, this
That
is
is
Paul
from our-
Connor. This is a map from our current comprehensive plan. So it's not, it's from 2016 as potential future improvements to the transportation network.
Well,
So, yeah, I guess my point was, is that we seem to have had already the planning commission really give input, it seems. I don't know, Paul, you can confirm this. This, I'm assuming, has been vetted by the planning commission.
I
at
guess
least.
what I would say, Megan, is that in 2016, on the subject of interstate interchanges, the plan is not very forceful. It reflected prior work, but I think that the Planning Commission felt that there were too many questions out there. Tilly Drive study had not even started yet. The RPC had not started this corridor work to really strongly make a statement. So I would say that this map and the 2016 plan sort of continued prior thoughts, but I wouldn't describe it as necessarily being a full vetting at that time, just because it's such a large subject.
And if I could
Okay.
follow that up, Megan, and for the rest of the council members, my impression of the situation, broadly speaking, with regards to the city of South Burlington's position on some major transportation investments over time, there's a couple of perspectives. One, regionally, for a long time, we were looking at the circular, to take traffic out of exit 14 by building 189, passing through Essex, connecting back to Colchester. That would have helped exit 14. A few years ago, the plug was pulled on that project, and I won't get into that conversation. And we spent a lot of time with the suburban communities, Colchester, Essex, Williston in particular, figuring out what circ alternatives projects should happen. However, when we updated our regional transportation plan in our last cycle here in 2018, it became pretty apparent that the issue that the circ was going to solve, which was the congestion at exit 14, was not being solved now without the circ highway. And so we kind of came back to, okay, what needs to be done? And in looking back at the history of our relationship with South Burlington organizationally, personally, it's been great. But in terms of really landing on what big improvements, if any, should be made to 89, we have a lot of things that have been on the table, but we really have never really sifted it through and kind of come to closure about which one or two things should we really move ahead with. And that maybe that's where we end up at this again, with kind of no decision. But it's a place where I think we saw an opportunity to kind of let's put a lot of resources into figuring out what we should do, work with the city to figure out what that is, and the residents, of course, and see if we can get closure about what we should do around the exit 14 problem. And I don't know what the answer to that is. I just know we need to go through a process together. I'm hoping the city will go through the process with us, and that this is helpful in terms of the city reaching conclusions about what it would like to see within the city. And we'll be bouncing that back and forth with kind of the regional perspective as well as the local perspective. And I think really hoping to have a dialogue with the city. And, maybe this is me being a little Pollyannish and optimistic, but I believe, if we have enough of those conversations, we can get to closure over the next, we're probably looking at an 18-month cycle to really get to closure. So none of these decisions, this isn't a next 2 or 3 month issue, but we are trying to make some steps along the way on the conversation. I probably should have included more of that context in this memo. Apologies.
Chair Reilly, I'd like to make a comment question, but I think Paul Connor had his hand up.
Hi, Helen. I just wanted to quickly, something that Charlie had talked with us about that is in the memo but isn't highlighted verbally. In the June part of this, Charlie spoke about the objective to whittle down the scope to analyze a few of the possible options in a little more depth. The other piece that I think that Charlie had spoken with us about is getting more, making sure that all of the questions, all of the metrics by which counselors would like to see an interchange reviewed be put out there. I know that was part of the early outreach, but making sure that if there's any questions, any ways in which evaluating this would be useful and helpful to counselors, that's an opportunity in the next couple months.
Okay, that sounds reasonable. Tom?
So to your original question, Charlie, and I hope that I'm not segueing away from a conversation that was still going, but you asked about how to engage with South Burlington. The one thing that comes to my mind, forums are great, and asking for the public at large to weigh in on things. I'm also a big fan of leveraging our standing committees. These are residents that know the city, that have invested time, and they're committed to it. So a few come to mind. I don't know if you have precedent for that, where in other communities you've reached out to standing committees to solicit feedback, but I think of the Bike and Ped Committee, the Parks and Rec Committee, the Natural Resources Committee. We have a new Economic Development Community Committee, and so on. But I think those are pools of people that are invested and committed to giving feedback and understand the trade-offs in the city that I'd love to hear their thoughts on all of these conversations regarding the interstate.
Can you go a little bit slower? I'm not sure I caught all of those.
I'll get you a link.
You have most of them listed under May A.
Okay.
You don't have, you have Bike and Ped, you don't have Natural Resources
Okay.
and Open Space. I'm not sure the DRB is the right group for this.
Not yet.
Pardon?
Not
But
yet.
certainly, yeah, not yet. I think the Economic Development Committee for sure, the Planning Commission,
The Energy Committee, I'd love to hear their thoughts too.
and the Energy Committee, that would be good. I agree with you, Tom. But that was down here, so I thought that's kind of how they were going to go about it, and that's.
But be
I think,
careful.
would
If you question those committees, you're going to end up with like not wanting to do anything because they don't want the interstate touched pretty much. They want all the infrastructure changes for walking and biking and whatever. So just be forewarned.
Well, so I'm happy personally, and I think, yeah, my staff may groan at me here, but to spend the time with each one of those committees, recognizing, I think to Tim's point, we're going to hear their individual perspectives. At some point, we need to, kind of meld it into a city perspective that makes sense from your standpoint, or just balances the interest. And I don't know if that's more of a role for the Planning Commission, which I know has also got a heavy load on its plate right now, or if I bring those issues to City Council. I'm happy to listen to as much input as we possibly can and try to meld it into something that provides some direction, and see if that makes sense to you guys. I don't know, other thoughts about how to meld all that together?
Charlie, we can facilitate a joint meeting of various committees at various different times with the council, or even without the council, and then leading up to them going with you to the council. So the staff will facilitate any type of multi-committee meeting that makes sense, just to cut down on the amount of time that everybody's
Sure.
got to commit to this. If that would work, Helen.
I think that's fine. I also think potentially when you frame the question, if it's framed in the manner of there are some real traffic congestion and concerns and there have been for a long time regarding exit 14. And we need to understand what is possibly a solution that this city supports. So it's not just, yeah, well, I don't want you to, break up my bike lane,
Yeah,
so don't build it anywhere, but rather we need to build it, or do something to, what's the solution to that congestion, which does not enhance our quality of life.
yeah, and I will say, personally, I think we're looking at opportunities to say, can we help make exit 14 and maybe Williston Road by extension a more livable, main thoroughfare to a city that actually is more accommodating to other modes of transportation and helps you achieve your energy goals, et cetera. So, Ray, if we can get some win-wins here, we'd love to find those. And so, well, that's helpful feedback. I'm going to take the feedback on the schedule as you're roughly okay going with this, but we have a lot of work to do to figure out how to get input during this process. And I know, I'm not sure if I am fully understanding, but I don't believe most of these committees are not meeting at this time, right?
Correct.
Okay.
But the planning commission opted to not meet until May, and I don't know what they're thinking going forward. I think we're all waiting to find out what the governor kind of says about meeting, and then if we feel comfortable going forward with everything electronic, we could.
Okay, yeah, so we'll start trying to work this up into a little bit more detail and framing the question more clearly and seeing, and we'll work with the staff on how to get input, and I'm sure we'll be back in front of you at some point. I would like to get back sometime in early June for you to take a look at what 2 interchanges we're thinking about moving ahead with, just as we're trying to rationalize the load, the work effort to do what makes sense. So I don't know if you could put that on your radar. We'll see if that's the first or second meeting in June. We might want to get back in front of you, and we'll see how many of these committees and how much input we can get in late May.
Okay, I think that's fine. I think it's always easier to respond to something that's a little more thought out in a plan than just, we got an issue and how do you want to solve it?
Indeed. And that's what we're trying to, kind of peel the layers of this onion, because, when we started looking at 89, we got, 7 proposals put on the table for interchanges, either whole new interchanges, some of which are well known to you, like 12B, but other brand new ones in Bolton, in Milton. And so we wanted to take a look at all of them and try to narrow them down in terms of what will make the most sense to move forward with. So we'll be back with a clearer question and also some data to inform the discussion in the next round.
Great. Any other comments by council or staff?
Yeah, Helen, we'll work, Paul and Justin and I will work with Charlie to get this all scheduled out with the committees and with the council, but I think you can count on seeing Charlie or his staff probably another half a dozen times before the end of the year. As we work through these are huge issues for the city of South Burlington and for the region, and we got to provide the kind of information that you need to be able to guide the Regional Planning Commission on this stuff. So staff will be working closely with Charlie and his team to make sure you have the information you need to move this forward.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie.
All right. Thanks, Charlie. We'll see you around.
Whether you want to or not. Yes, thank you.
Exactly right. We always want to. So let's see, David, maybe David isn't going to show up.
Helen, I sent him an email here about 20 minutes ago and haven't heard anything back. Let me check one more time. Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Okay. Well, we are way ahead of time.
Well, do we want to discuss the election, or do we not have enough information at this point to do that at least? We're warned for May
Yeah.
May 28th, correct?
That's my understanding.
Yes.
And did she nail down a complete plan yet for how the voting will be carried out? Bless you.
Excuse me. Donna's been talking with Tom and Coralie and I about how we can work with the Secretary of State's office and with her office and with the school district to pull this off on the 28th. The BCA has decided, as I understand it, to use all four of the polling places, and carry this off as a normal election, but to promote mail-in ballots or absentee ballots as much as possible. And so as that date of the 28th is coming up fairly quickly, she's pushing pretty hard to get the ballots printed and so on. I don't have much more for you than that, other than it looks like it's going to be a more of a traditional type of a election rather than a total mail-in. Tom, do you have any other perspective on that, Tom Hubbard?
No, I think that's pretty much it, Kevin. At this point, she did mention that I think it's up till 7 days before the election, the actual location could change up to that point. So it doesn't have to remain at 4 locations if a hotel or a gymnasium or some other place was identified. I think that's the only other thing that was remaining to be resolved, but right now it's the 4 locations.
So I hate to be the worrywart here, but do we feel like the city has enough resources in terms of PPEs to do the counting and the final work at the end of the night to handle approximately maybe 2,000 to 4,000 pieces of paper that have been touched by lots of individuals, who are probably just fine, but to err on the side of caution, are there going to be individuals handling those papers with, some face shields, at least gloves, maybe a gown? I don't know what you want to do. These are things I want to consider before I commit myself to working in the polls.
Yeah, there's a lot of detail like that, Tim, that we have talked about, but we haven't concluded. We realize that we're going to have to erect some structures to protect the poll workers from interfacing directly with the public, probably some screens, some plastic shields and so on. We'll probably end up doing some construction at the polling sites to separate the workers from the voters, with plenty of PPE and plenty of hand sanitizer and all those sorts of things, but we don't have all that exactly worked out yet.
Okay.
But believe me, that those issues are absolutely foremost in our mind.
Okay. So we moving on to item 9 then. Update on the city response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Pandemonium.
Yeah. So Kevin, you want to?
Thanks, Helen. We have kind of 2 parts to this discussion. One is just to update you and the public about all the things we have been doing at the staff level and at the administrative and departmental level to continue to provide services to the public. But another piece of this needs to be a discussion leading toward a decision around reopening some city-owned public buildings and then public buildings generally around masks and that sort of thing. Let me just start by saying we continue to maintain contact with our employees. The management team meets every week at 10 o'clock on Wednesday. We've essentially doubled the number of meetings that we have. Normally we meet every other week, but now it's every week. Following that, we have a town hall meeting with our staff At those meetings, we've had as many as 65 members of our team participate in those meetings. And I think it's been really helpful for staff who are principally the ones who are furloughed to stay connected to the city, which is what we want them to do. I know Coralie's on the call right now, but we had a maximum of 43 people who were on furlough. These were non-essential employees or employees who are able to work completely from home, who have utilized the furlough program. So these people are working, these members of our team are working less than 35 hours a week. They're now into their second full week of being furloughed. So the week that or the third week, I guess, is it? But they should have gotten a check last week, and they'll get a check this week for work that was done in the prior week, if all goes well. And Coralie can probably comment on her work. Actually, let me stop right at that point. I really have to recognize Coralie's work on this. She's on the call here. Coralie and Tom and Justin have done just an extraordinary job of putting this whole furlough program together. Nobody wants to have our employees on furlough, but it was the fiscally responsible thing to do. And Coralie led our effort and has just done an extraordinary effort. And since she's on the call, I want to recognize her for that.
Thank you, Coralie.
Thank you, Coralie.
And Tom.
And
Justin.
Thank you, Coralie.
On top of doing, she's going to talk to you a little while later about the clinic work she's been doing and a host of just one-off human resources things. And it's just been an extraordinary effort to include some Sunday afternoons working with our staff and so on. So thank you, Coralie. Our staff are now beginning to return to work at the Department of Public Works. We had about half the team there now, gearing up for Wednesday when more will be coming in, and we'll be reasonably fully deployed at DPW on Monday of this coming week. That's in addition to all of the essential employees we have, to include all of our firefighters, all of our police department, all of our water quality division folks. So we're starting to bring people back in. Where people can continue to work from home, the governor's guidance is to keep people at home. And so we have quite a number of employees who are able to function completely from home, if not having to come in for an hour someday to do something. So we're starting to emerge a little bit, but I can see that the office staff and possibly the library folks will continue to be on furlough for up until May 18th. When we furloughed staff, we told them May 18th was the return date. And as we get closer to that, we're going to have to decide if that's still reasonable given the governor's executive order. All of this is being driven by the governor's executive order. So we're highly compliant with what he's doing. And I might tell you also that Justin and the folks at Public Works and Water Quality and Stormwater are putting together the obligated plan and PPE materials and cleaning materials and so on to keep our staff safe. Helen already talked about the library. We're excited, and I really got to give credit to Jennifer Murray, our librarian, who has been working with her colleagues across the state to come up with plans to do the curbside. I won't repeat that. I think Helen gave a great overview of what that's going to be, but on Wednesday we're going to start offering that service. And I think it was smart of Jennifer to recognize that even as we emerge from this and public buildings are open again, not all of our library patrons will want to come into the mall, and they're going to want to continue to have curbside service. And then, as Helen noted, if the numbers start going the wrong direction and the governor tightens up again, we'll have a program in place to be able to provide some library services. Donna's office is open, as it has been throughout, to one person coming in at a time to do title searches and that sort of thing. But it's very strictly monitored, and we keep the needed separation between the staff and the individual coming in to do the title search. These are people who are generally known to Donna's office, and so they need to continue to do that work. Donna has spent a lot of time with the Secretary of State's office and with others talking about the upcoming election. The city or the school board has now decided May 28th. We spoke about that earlier. And so Tom and I will be doing a lot of work with Donna over the next 7 days to make sure that she has everything she needs to run the election in 24 days from now, I guess. Masks and all sorts of things. With that, I would stop and see if you have any questions before we move on to a policy discussion about PPE as we start to emerge from the lockdown.
Any update on if anyone has contracted the virus?
On our team, we had
two.
We had two. We had two people who we believe, one for sure tested positive, and we think the other one did too. Both of them are through that, and they've recovered. We have nobody who's being monitored right now. And thankfully, and again, it's the professionalism of our first responders who understand how to use PPE and have kept themselves safe throughout. We, knock on wood that will continue, but I really have to hand it to their training and to their leadership for keeping them safe out there. We get daily reports from Captain Lascala for the police or for the fire department. Terry is online with us every day. Terry's still recovering from some other health issues, and he needs to be at home, but he's actively engaged with us every single day. Same thing with Chief Burke. We get a report every day, and then every day in the afternoon at 3 o'clock, we meet as a public safety leadership team. Sean, Terry, Sasha, Tom, Coralie, and I. We meet every afternoon to get updates on the status of the city and the calls that our emergency responders are going to. Let me move on to the issue of masks. As things begin to open up out in the public sector or in the private sector, we're going to have more and more people entering buildings. Some of this discussion is about city-owned buildings, and some of this discussion is about just general public spaces. The governor has issued guidance on social distancing and the many other things that we've been doing to try to stay safe, but he has not issued a requirement, as far as I know, that when you are in a public place, you must wear a mask. Now, Andrew did a short legal overview of what the city could do in this regard in response to a resident who asked about this mail carriers going into a senior living center. Can't the city compel them to wear a mask, was the question. An interesting issue. Paul, can you, and I thought that I had sent Andrew's piece out to you, but maybe I didn't.
No, you did. You did.
You did.
I did? Okay, great.
Yep.
So reading through there, as a Dillon's rule state, which means that we derive all of our authority from the legislature. We don't have explicit authority to compel people to wear masks, either in city buildings or in public places. Now, we can compel our employees to do it, but it's a little bit dicey when we start compelling the public. My inclination is to require people who come into any city-owned building to have to wear a mask. I just don't want my staff unnecessarily exposed. And so I would like to mandate that for City Hall. We're not going to open up the police department or the fire department or the Public Works Department, but for the library and for City Hall, which will be reopening at some point, I would like to require people to wear masks entering here. And I would just, before we move on to the other broader issue, I just want to get council feedback on that.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yep, 100%.
No shirt, no
I'm-
shoes, no masks, no service.
Megan,
Okay,
did you
thank
weigh
you.
in?
I nodded. Yeah, I agree.
Okay, I
Okay.
do too. So that,
And
and
it
Tom
can be-
Chittenden,
can
did
be
you
a-
weigh in?
So I said they also need to wear shirts and shoes.
Oh, okay, I didn't recognize
And
your
I mean,
voice.
if you qualify it as any face covering, a scarf, a
Yeah,
bandana,
yep.
a balaclava, I don't care what it is, as long as it guards this area right here, I'm fine.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think that's what we probably ought to do for voting as well, but that's another issue, I suppose.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, Helen, because we just discussed the voting, but I would think that want to vote, got to wear a mask. I don't think that's asking too much at all. I mean, I'm not happy with the whole voting structure anyway. Unfortunate is, I think we should have sucked it up and done the whole darn thing by mail. But I don't think anybody should be allowed into a polling place. That's a public facility without a mask, period. That's not
But
fair.
if that's true, we're going to have to advertise that far and wide before the
Yep.
election.
Right. But couldn't we hand out masks? I mean,
I-
do we
Yeah.
have masks on supply where people can simply hand out masks to people as they walk towards the polling place? That's what I would like to see. I certainly don't want it to be an impediment where people are turned away. So I'd really
Yeah.
like to make it possible for people to, to vote by simply having someone there with masks to hand out.
Well, certainly if
Right.
we can get the inventory, that's the best way to do it.
We'll check on that, Megan. We'll check and see what we can do by way of inventory. I think Tim's point was well taken. It doesn't have to be the standard kind of cloth mask. It can be a bandana or something else, but let us check on the inventory and move toward that requirement that people coming in to vote need to wear a mask.
Hey, Kevin, I recall, I think the state, maybe the Department of Health actually has an inventory of masks. And if you contact them, you just may be able to get the basic masks from the state. I only mention that because I know somebody contacted them. It wasn't my wife's medical practice, but another one contacted the state, and the state is providing an inventory of masks. So they may have an inventory. It's worth checking on that.
Well, they were
We
handing
will.
them out in Hannaford a couple days ago, right?
Were they?
Yeah.
I agree with Tom in his little chat thing. If you want to read the chat, I would agree that I don't think we should, our first line out there is we have
Yeah.
masks to give out. I think we
Right.
really need to encourage people or say, you have an option. If you're against wearing a mask, then vote absentee. You never have to wear a mask.
I agree with Tom.
But I think we need to have them in the case, like, I don't know, the other day I went to walk with my friend and I forgot to bring my mask. Well, she lent me one of her clean ones. So it's nice to have some options. But we don't have to say, come in and get a free mask while you vote.
Right.
I mean,
Well,
because
we'll
I don't know
need
how
to-
many thousand we would need. So
Yeah. We'll need to get word out on that. Tom and I will be talking to Donna probably tomorrow about this, and we will encourage people to vote absentee if they can, and then we'll try to have masks available for people who don't bring them in with them. So we'll try to do that.
I mean, I
ask
suppose
you
it
a
could be a
question.
bandana. I mean, they're probably cheaper than a mask and easier to get now. I don't know.
Yeah.
can I butt in and ask a question if that's okay?
You may,
Again,
David.
back to the election, if we're encouraging people to vote absentee, the city's not that big. Why do we need 4 polling places? Why can't we be practical and just have 1 or 2 going on the premise that most people, many more people than usual will vote absentee? So the more places, the greater the expense and the more volunteers.
Yeah, I prefer to have the lowest density possible among the voters, and spreading it out over 3 locations to me is the lowest density.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that makes sense too.
Yeah.
Well, and
Alright.
David, it also was an issue that we wanted to at the BCA meeting, the people who were there, the majority agreed that if we keep the election as normal as possible, then it disperses them, but then people aren't confused to go to Chamberlain when
Okay,
actually
that's
the only
fine.
place they can vote. We also agreed to, since there's only one question and it doesn't matter what district, that if you go to the wrong one, you can just vote there and we can make a call. So you're off the checklist of.
That's fine. I
whatever.
just asked the question, but you
So,
guys
I
have
mean, a lot
clarified.
of us did talk about that.
Okay.
What about absentee voting in City Hall? Is that going to be allowed?
You mean a voting in City Hall in advance?
Yeah.
I believe it is.
Okay.
No, did we talk about that the other day?
I don't think we agreed to that.
Yeah, I think what
I wasn't there
I,
at the meeting.
I think what Don's exploring is whether or not we could set up some booths in the conference room area, but she's still working with Secretary of State every day, both in terms of guidance on this and what kind of supplies are going to be available from the state and those types of things. So I know she's frustrated because the answers aren't really coming quick enough, and we need the answer soon.
Well, and I think also David and Elizabeth from the school side volunteered to really help get the word out. So whenever we decide exactly how this might happen, they will help educate the public about where to go or what the process is. Vote early. This is what you can and cannot do. So there's another avenue of education for the public.
Excellent.
My only concern is that this will be the first time that a very large random group of people will be in fairly close contact since the stay-at-home order originated. If I were a virologist or an epidemiologist, I would totally recommend against doing this. But I think there were like 2 people left in the ICU yesterday. We've stopped at 53 deaths. They closed Patrick Gym. I think we flattened the curve. I'm not an expert, but I mean, maybe it's time that we try to, deal with reality and move forward. So.
And right now, we don't even know if City Hall will be opened up to the public before the vote actually takes place. So there's just a lot up in the air still that we need answers to.
If you can't even open City Hall before May 28th, there's no way we should be having an election with people randomly walking into a building and greeting the people to get their ballot to go then vote and put it in a machine and then have people pull them out of the. It just, the more I think about it, if let's say it's 4,000 people, that's a lot of people that have never come near each other in the last 2 months. I'm not saying that any of them are infected, but you just raise the risk. And the thing is that a lot of those people are over 60, over 50, over 60, over 70, and they're at the highest risk. Because I've watched those people come through those polling places, and anyway, I'm done. Thank you.
But a great number of people have already registered for an absentee ballot. I think Donna said 1,100 who are automatically on that. And I suspect many of them are older. So I think some of it is education, Tim. And, I think that it's most problematic for the poll workers. I mean, you stand in line and at any given time, maybe there's 20 people waiting to vote. As a poll worker, you get 20 every 20 minutes. So.
We will
Well-
probably create barriers, Helen, almost a little booth-like area for poll workers so they can be isolated to an extent behind plastic. But we're sensitive to that issue too. So, the other issue I wanted to raise with you, and it goes to Andrew's a review as well, is whether or not the city has the authority to compel masks to be worn in all public buildings. He notes that years ago, the city banned smoking in public places. And he sees this as reasonably the same thing. Now, the state came along at a later date and made it state law. But we don't really have a lot of authority in this area, but it could be done if the city wanted it to be done. It's very difficult to enforce it.
Any public building is basically any building, period, correct? That people can walk into. That would be retailers, restaurants, anything. Is that right?
That's right. Any place you can't smoke now, you would have to have a mask in.
Got it.
This is it's a big question. The governor has not gone this far. But before this opens up, and it likely will before your next meeting, I wanted you to at least be thinking about it.
Well, the governor said to the governor's news today was that by the end of the week, he's going to announce an extension to the May 15th stay-at-home order. So I don't know what that means. I'd prefer to come down on the side of caution. If you listen to the national projections, especially today, they predict that this is going to get worse again, and that Vermont is in a very good place right now. I think the administration has done an excellent job, and if we're not as cautious as we can possibly be, I don't want to be contributory towards this thing getting out of hand in Vermont. So from my perspective, I'm all for it, but that's my personal opinion and preference from somebody who's immunocompromised and can't go anywhere anyway.
Well, I'll weigh in. I think it's the prudent thing to do. I think the countries that have had really strong rules and have developed and accepted a culture of wearing masks have been much more successful than those countries or states or regions that it's kind of like, if you want to, you can. And
Absolutely true.
I think it's like all sorts of laws. I mean, how do we make sure that nobody ever speeds? They speed all the time and don't get caught. Occasionally they get caught, but there's all sorts of laws that are in place that, you're not supposed to beat your children either, or your spouse. So, I think this is a health issue that is really important. And I know people don't like it, but I think we should be leaders and take a stand. And if the federal government doesn't want to, or, the Governor Scott isn't willing to go that far, that's their issue. But for my community, I would like to feel as if that were the values that we share, and that should be the case. And if someone wants to take us to court, let them.
Well stated. I agree. It might also give additional comfort and peace of mind to the people who own and operate those buildings, such as a retailer, that they know that anybody coming into their store is supposed to be wearing a mask. And it gives them more reason to say, please put on a mask before you come into the store or the shop or whatever it is. I think Helen stated that very well. I think we should do it.
I agree. And Costco is requiring people to have face coverings when they go in now, and that's nationwide, I believe.
It is.
And so does Trader Joe's.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not against the requirement, but I think what I heard in your setup, Kevin, is that the governor is yet to say if he is gonna recommend such a policy statewide. So it would be useful to know if that's going to come down the pike, so to speak. So South Burlington doesn't necessarily have to be the one blazing the trail on requiring masks in all places where you can't smoke. But I support it too.
I think that we should be the leaders in this, and our health officer should take the lead and make the determination that no person shall visit any public place in the city where you're going to come in contact with people without wearing a face covering.
Let's do it.
But just to reduce friction and lawsuits, that's why I like the idea of seeing if the governor's going to weigh in too. Just, we have power in collective action. But yeah,
the longer we wait for the governor to take action on that, that's that many people that are going to a store that don't have their face covered. I was at Costco 2 weeks ago. I browbeat 3 people in a row. Ma'am, where is your face mask? I don't have one. Do you have a scarf at home? Yeah. Next time, why don't you wear it? 2 days later, they enacted the rule, right, to force everybody they won't let you in without a mask.
I make a motion that we require people entering public buildings in the city of South Burlington to be wearing a mask.
Or a face covering of some sort.
Or an equivalent face covering.
Or do we want to phrase it in such a way that we ask the city manager to move forward with trying to enact this ordinance, or to give us?
I'm not against any of this action, but I just know it's not a warned item, and I don't know if it falls within this listed item. I'm fully supportive of this, Dave, and you've got my support. I'm just wondering if the right way to go about this is to at least have the public have some opportunity to know that we're about to make such an action. But again, you'll have my support. I just want to do this right, so I look to Kevin and Paul for possible suggestions on how best to move forward.
Well, let's do this. Let's ask Kevin to ask Andrew tomorrow what the best approach would be and the best way to handle it, and then move as expeditiously as possible to put it in place. How's that?
Which will probably mean a quick special meeting of the council in the next week to 10 days, probably.
Sooner the better.
Since we're doing this electronically anyway.
Okay.
Okay.
And Maddie can include it in an article in the other paper so people will can read that we were discussing this, and the council feels pretty strongly that this is the prudent thing to do. But we're not voting on it tonight.
And I want to be clear that we are not trampling on anybody's goddamn personal freedoms here. We are talking about a public health issue that the governor declared a state of emergency in the state of Vermont. And that's what we're reacting to. It has nothing to do about personal freedom. That's not what it's about. It's about people taking personal responsibility for their ability to infect other people when they go somewhere and they're not covering their faces. They have a responsibility to prevent other people from getting sick when they are asymptomatic. And that's our responsibility to the city and to the citizens of South Burlington to make sure that they are guarded by this resolution or whatever it is that comes forward. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay.
I want to just say one follow-up comment. I just want to say, Kim, I'm with you. And my point on the governor is that I just think that we'll be better off if it's not just South Burlington that pursues this. So I'm fine with us leading on this, and hopefully it spurs action broadly so that when our residents visit other towns in Williston, Colchester, that there's some similar guidance. But I'm with you, and I support this action.
Good. Let's go for it. Done.
All right. I will get with Andrew and Amanda, and we'll figure out the best way to go about doing this. But probably, I'm quite certain it's going to need a council endorsement. So we'll come back to you with a plan at probably a special meeting, because things may open up before your next meeting. I'm not sure, but we'll come back to you in a timely way with a proposal.
No, let's have a special meeting. It's not like any of us are going very far.
Dave, we'll figure that out. Barb?
I just want to be, as a public member who's here, I may be the only one. I just want to say bravo. I am blessed to live in the 2 states that are doing really well. And even though there are 40 million people in California, they are keeping the line flat because people are masked. So thank you for taking the leadership on this.
Just stay off
Alright.
the beaches out there, Barb. It doesn't look safe.
Are
What's
there
that?
any other public
Some-
members who would like to weigh in? We got a D, Doug something, and I don't know if Peter Smyer is not on the call or doesn't wish to speak, but if you want to, we'll listen.
Peter
Okay.
was probably on for the CCRPC issue.
All righty, so you'll get back with us with whatever it is, a proposal, an ordinance, whatever, and then we can have a special meeting. We can make sure the public knows about it, and if there's feedback, maybe you can share it with the South Burlington Business Association to let them know this is what we're planning on if they wanted to weigh in. You know,
Will
might be
do.
good to.
And Kevin and Coralie, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I just want to go back to the absentee ballot voting at City Hall. I think Donna's position was unless she was mandated to do so, that was not gonna happen. Is that correct? Is that your recollection, Kevin? I just want to be clear on that.
I see Coralie nodding her head, yes. And both you have a better memory than me, so I will agree with what you said.
I would just add that Donna was talking about using the conference room for the workers when you're dealing with absentee ballots and counting ballots, as far as having more space for the workers versus having people come in to that space. So I think that's what she's thinking about.
I think you're right. Okay, so moving on to item 10. This is a council review and discussion of property tax payment guidelines and obligations of the city to pay education taxes to the school district. And Tom Hubbard's going to talk to us about it. We have some real easy issues this meeting.
Yeah, and this one is an important one and a complicated one. And I have a series of bullet points I'd like to go through, Helen, if I could just ask the council's patience to get through this information, because it all ties together before we begin a discussion about it. So I'll just start by saying, obviously, cities and towns are facing the same kinds of challenges which the state government is struggling with as part of this crisis. It's estimated statewide that the local budget impacts could be as high as 3 to 5% for FY20 and as much as 15 to 20% for FY21. Should this be the case, translated into South Burlington dollars, that's about a 750,000 to 1 million impact in FY20 and as much as a 3.9 to a 5.2 million dollar impact for FY21. Now, this is a statewide projection. It's going to be different from community to community, but that's kind of the best data that we have to go on at this point. If we were to follow the analysis the state recently did in terms of looking at year-end projections for what the local options tax would bring in, we're estimating we'd have a shortfall of about $510,000 in FY20. 63 communities in Vermont still have property tax payments due in either May or June this year for FY20. Early indications are likely there will be a 10% reduction in municipal property tax payments alone due to delinquencies in those payments, which could be a precursor to tax revenue shortfalls in FY21. Through our City Managers Association, the efforts of the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, we're asking the state to commit resources to fill those gaps, including any potential use of the $1.25 billion in CARES Act funding for the state of Vermont. While current funding to cities and towns under the CARES Act went to municipalities of 500,000 or more, that obviously did not provide any help to Vermont. We understand there may be direct assistance to cities in the next aid package from the federal government, Details are still unclear as to what funding this may offer to communities in Vermont. This does not address the additional crisis represented by the State Education Fund, education property taxes, and the city's role in collecting education property taxes. State ed taxes are required to be paid to the state and to the school district, regardless of whether or not the city is able to collect those taxes. We are merely the collectors of the education property tax, a pass-through function. Municipalities are also charged by the state an 8% penalty for any late payments, and the municipality becomes subject to withholding of state funds due to the city for any purpose during that period of time. This would be grant money, highway aid, etc. On average, for every $3 in state ed taxes that we collect, South Burlington roughly collects $1 for all municipal taxes, as we know, about 25%. Due to the higher rate of unemployment and many businesses not producing goods and services, we're concerned about the city's ability to collect from taxpayers and in turn pay our state education tax for FY21. We're committed to reduce spending and or interfund borrow to cover the shortfall in revenue and taxes for municipal services. However, we have no capacity to do this for the state ed tax, which again is 3 times the amount of municipal taxes. This would place the municipality in an impossible situation. Options would be to not pay, which is really not viable, tax sale all our residents and businesses, which makes no sense to us as a community, or borrow the money, potentially 3 times what we would need to cover our municipal services. We're requesting the state of Vermont to do several things. First, to eliminate the 8% penalty and withholding of state funds to municipalities, and take the responsibility of borrowing to pay unpaid state ed taxes until the economic emergency created by COVID-19 is over, and the vast majority of taxpayers are able to repay unpaid ed taxes. And interest for these charges should only match the rate the state is able to arrange for the borrowing of such funds. Legislators are holding several different discussions to address the mounting crisis that cities are facing. The legislature is aware of the scope of the problem and looking for solutions, as we are, that do not exacerbate the harm already done to taxpayers. The House GovOps Committee has voted to pass S-344, a bill that was sent to them from the Senate early last week. The bill provides that during the COVID-19 state of emergency, a municipal legislative body is authorized to do several things. First, to extend or establish a new time and method to pay property taxes collected by the municipality from taxpayers. Second, to establish a grace period for or decrease or waive any penalty, interest, or fee imposed on taxpayers for late payment of property taxes. And third, to reduce the municipal tax rate as a result of some expenses in adopted budgets being reduced. Municipalities have until January 1st of 2021 to adopt any of these provisions. However, the last section of this bill makes clear that this applies only to property taxes collected by a municipality from the taxpayers. It does not apply to deadlines, penalties, or interest the state imposes on a municipality with respect to paying the statewide education property tax or money to the school district. So in essence, while the authority would provide some relief, it's unlikely that municipalities could afford to enact any of these provisions, so long as the Ed Fund would still need to be made whole and subject to the interest and penalties currently in place. In the latest correspondence from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, the House Ways and Means Committee, the Senate Finance Committee, and the State Treasurer are considering ways that the state might pay the interest for a municipality's borrowing to cover the obligation for remitting that portion of education property tax payments it did not receive from the property taxpayer. Another proposal being floated is to provide a credit, potentially using a portion of the CARES Act funds to taxpayers on a per parcel basis. Lots of issues still need to be resolved with this, including whether or not this would be permissible under the CARES Act fund. Any proposal being considered would need to be finalized by June 1st, when the next ed fund payment is due to the state. Lots of information here with not a lot of answers, but certainly a lot of concern. So thanks for your patience and let me go through those different bullet points. Happy to respond to any questions that we can provide any more insight to at this point that you might have.
We are on track for the March collections, right?
We are, Tim. We're in good shape, actually, about 93%. So that impact for FY20 is really not a concern in terms of property tax.
Is 93% like a normal percentage you would get by a certain date?
Yeah, anything over 90 is kind of within the range that we've had.
And so then August becomes problematic for us, right?
Correct. It's just an unknown at this point for us. More so with the ed fund dollars than with the municipal tax dollars.
What happened in 2009? Did this sort of thing happen before?
Yeah, I was certainly in a different role back then, Tim, so I really can't speak to it, but I don't think to the impact that this has had. I really don't.
Is there
Well,
something?
I don't know what to say. That's terrible. Tom?
So,
So amount of information there.
do we have an opportunity to speak as one voice as a council to endorse to light a fire under the legislators to motivate them? And is there one of the specific options? I think you were gravitating towards the one at the end. Should we put that in a formal resolution to call on them to do it? I know we've already sent emails and our legislators have responded, but something directed at the governor or some other avenue?
Yeah, our legislators have been, brought up to date. I did discuss this a bit with Kevin today. Kevin, you want to share your thoughts on that? I think we're kind of waiting until we really have something that the Vermont League wants to say, this is the one we want, and then to kind of get behind it. Whereas there's several things being discussed today, and I think, Tom, not enough information about either one of them as to really saying, yeah, that's the one we want to get behind right now. We're not sure that the CARES Act funding would be able to give us the relief we need, and we're not sure with the per parcel credit if that's something that could be done either. So I think until we understand each of the proposals better, but I think there will be a time that we'll be looking to have the council support a resolution with a lot of other municipalities throughout the state. Is that a fair assumption, Kevin?
Yeah, exactly, Tom. Exactly.
Well, Dave, that makes sense, and certainly I would hope that the state would waive. I think what you said is that 8% penalty for a late payment or whatever it was, and so if CARES Act money could be used and they waive penalties, that would put us in a far better position, would it not?
If they applied it to the state ed funds as well, yes.
Yes. So I think I think that's our current take on it, and we see what other communities do, and I agree. If the Vermont League of Cities and Towns then takes the lead and represents the majority of the communities in the state, I would hope that has some power.
Did I understand that I mean, that was a lot of data. So in F 344, there was something about God, now I just lost my train of thought. What was I going to ask? Shoot, I'll think of it. It just escaped me. Sorry. Senior moment.
Okay, there was, I'll
We
send,
don't think,
I'll send
we
a
don't think
copy
that-
of all those notes to you so that you have them.
yeah. We don't think that bill as it came out of the Senate, Helen, helps us really.
Yeah, no, it doesn't sound like it.
If we delay, if we take the authority that will be granted to delay the vote until later in the year, we're still on the hook for meeting the deadlines for the ed fund payment.
I see.
So I have no idea at all why the Senate even passed this thing, but
I now remember my question, and it was, and maybe I just misunderstood because of something you just said, but in terms of, did I understand that we could change our budget at some point without, and I'm thinking, I mean, we got a little piece of the action, but can the school, I mean, we're going to vote on another budget. Let's hope it passes. But then if the reality is we're short, I don't know, $5 million, is the school able to, on the fly, change their budget to cover that? I mean, I know that would be drastic and it would be laying people off potentially, but I mean, what do we do? Is that what they were saying we could do? Change our
Well-
budget midway through?
We can change the municipal budget.
What about the school budget?
I-
That's the lion's share.
The obligation is to fully fund them for the money that they've been approved for, whether or not we collect the taxes from taxpayers.
So wouldn't it be helpful if the schools would have the same opportunity? I know it's always harder because you got contracts and it's mostly people, but I mean, you can't get, what's the term, something out of stone? If the money isn't there, the money isn't there.
Right, possibly, Helen. Yeah, I think it's, I know they're looking at a lot of options on the state
Okay.
level. I think they have a good sense now in terms of what they're hearing from communities about how difficult, really impossible, this is going to be unless they make some changes with the ed fund.
yeah, the whole ed fund issue makes this that much more complex because we have an obligation to the state. Even if the school district cut its budget somewhat, the full effect of that wouldn't be to the benefit of the South Burlington taxpayer. I think that would get spread out system-wide.
Gotcha.
Correct.
Any
It's a
other
mess.
comments or
Well, I'm concerned
despair?
about this immensely, but I get more concerned when I hear about possible programs that might deal with individual homeowners and their tax, inability to pay taxes. That raises red flags for me right off the bat because I know there are people out there that'll take advantage of anything they can, even when they don't deserve it. So it's like, how do you attack this problem? Is it from the state down or from the city up? And does the school take a hit, or does the state take the hit and try to fill that cut back up with federal dollars? I mean, it doesn't seem normal to penalize the cities that can't raise the money because their taxpayers are broke, right? And then force the city to backfill that budget amount with money that we never budgeted for in the first place. That just doesn't make any sense at all.
Right.
Well, we do
So-
have the option to transfer the fees onto our residents. I'm not saying I want to do that, but we can charge late fees. We do charge late fees that if we don't collect it, but then that's the real problem with if we never see it and the money is still owed. I'm not advancing that notion, but I'm wondering if that's what the state's thinking, is that we're the ones that need to go out and collect this. And if they loosen this, then we won't do our due diligence that you're speaking to there, Tim, about motivating people to pay their taxes.
I think that's pretty accurate, Tom.
Well, for me, it really
Megan?
comes down to for me, it comes down to the federal government. That's really, needing to look at this third, injection of funds here for the states, because I really think that the federal government has not yet responded to the very real need of, these individual taxpayers that then, the monies that go into the local government and then to the state government, and the state governments are responsible for so many things. I don't know if there is any kind of, I know that there's a National Governors Association. Is there something with the International City Managers Association, some way for individual cities or towns to communicate this real need for the federal government to act?
I know our
That would-
senators have signed on to the proposed legislation in this third stimulus to make sure that smaller towns and cities are protected. That money could be funneled to the states for that purpose and then given out to communities. It can be given directly to communities. I think that still is kind of being worked out in Congress. So there's not a lot of detail. I think that there is a possibility, Megan, that we could get some direct federal funding to help with this. And we just have to kind of be a little bit patient, I guess, to find out what is that going to be. I think it's part of why the state is holding on to in hopes that there'll be some federal dollars that will come forth to help with this.
What's the drop dead date? Meaning we'll first really see and understand perhaps the inability of our residents to be able to pay their property taxes in August. Other cities, I guess, are feeling it now in June, or will feel it in June.
Yeah,
But-
even for this fiscal year, right?
Yeah, right, sooner than we. But when will it be sort of a universal, oh my God, no one can pay, well, not no one, but a large portion of our residents, for lack of a job or income or sickness or whatever, can't afford their property taxes. So they don't pay them.
Mhm.
And then all the cities or towns don't have money for schools. I mean, is anyone thinking we got to get this solved by October at the latest, or I don't know.
I think the June deadline is an important one because that's when the next payment to the state is required. So I think that the state at least has to, unless they extend that deadline of that payment being due, has to make some decision so that municipalities have some guidance here. And like I said, some of those communities won't even be voting on a budget until June.
Oh,
It's
that's
just kind of all over the map within the state of Vermont.
yeah.
And the
Ugh.
same in terms of how taxes are collected. Some cities and towns are twice a year, some are 3, some are 4. So it's very different around the state. I think we'll see the biggest impact and realization of what we can expect, I think, with the August tax payment.
If we don't get an answer from the state, and I'm going to regret saying this, but I'm going to look to you, Kevin, do we have the option to borrow against our own sewer fund and then charge ourselves an interest rate to avoid here in South Burlington assessing those fees? So we make good with the state. We have an IOU, and then that just gives us the time to collect from our residents over the next 2 years. I know there's cautions with that. I remember previous conversations where we can do that as long as we charge ourselves a market rate interest or market interest.
Yeah, we can do that. We've done it several times, so Tom, I don't know what's left, Tom.
We could do it
Covered.
for the municipal side of things, Tom,
Yeah,
but there's no way we could absorb the $46 million needed to be paid out to the school by interfund borrow.
But if it's only like 5 million, like Helen was talking about, if we collect the majority of the taxes, but short 5 or 10%, I don't know.
Yeah, we'd have to wait and see what that number is, Tom. But yeah, it wouldn't be the whole thing, obviously, but. the
Tom,
school
you
doesn't-
sure you want to take this on? In your next election? These are tough questions.
I like to be busy.
Hmm.
So we'll continue to update you as
Okay.
we hear more, and it will probably be in between meetings. Just to kind of keep you abreast as to what we're hearing and what we're thinking.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Well, I
come back
must
to you
say
with
the
some better
updates,
news.
I'm sorry, the weekly updates have been, and sometimes bi-weekly or twice a week, if that's what it would, have been excellent, Kevin, and I appreciate them. I feel like you've really kept us in the loop with the information you've received.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 11, if there's no other comments, update on the status of the city employee wellness clinic. And that's Coralie.
Okay,
Something
so, what'd you say, Tom?
Something positive.
Yeah, yeah.
Positive. We've made some progress. So, first, there is a name. I don't know if Kevin's filled you in on this. So if I'm repeating myself or repeating him, excuse me, but it is named the Summit Employers Health Center. And the name Summit is more about the view and mountains and getting to the best versus anything else. So that is the name. It is going to be at 1 Kennedy Drive, so sort of kitty corner to City Hall. We're in the first unit on the corner. Signage is going to be fabulous because it's on both sides of the building. We're right on the corner, and that signage should be going up this week, I believe. The location is fully ready. All of the upfit has been done. All the utilities are ready to go, and we're awaiting medical furniture and desks and waiting room furniture at the moment, but all of that is slated to arrive this month. We have just hired the provider. So the health center was looking at either a physician's assistant or a nurse practitioner. She accepted on Friday a nurse practitioner who has experience in urgent and emergent care, so emergency room care, primary care, and family medicine, as well as she's been a school nurse. So the health center is going to, could treat someone as young as 6 years old. So because the health center could be open for dependents and spouses as well when we look at the whole population with our partners. So she is well-rounded. We met her last week and offered her the position. And so she will come on board with us. Let's see, we have moved the date for the opening of the health center to July 8th. There are a couple of reasons for that. One is timing. As we bring a provider on board, they have to give notice and we need to get them trained up. I say we, Marathon Health as our partner in this, as our provider, needs to get them trained up. So they needed time to be able to do that. So July 8th is the first day. It is a Wednesday, but they do some mock runs the first couple of days in the week in the center to make sure everything goes smoothly. So Christina Taranjo is the gal's name, and she will also be part of our hiring team for the medical assistant. They have 4 people in the queue for applicants, and so depending on how well she works with this person or what their interaction is, that's part of how that person will be chosen, because there'll be those 2 providers in the health center. The medical assistant, she will do intake. She or he will do intake plus labs and help set appointments. And then the provider will obviously then see patients after that. Additionally, for the health center, and we started out this way, but we've pushed it off till the fall based on budget and waiting for partners to come on board. We were fairly committed to having a behavioral medicine or a behavioral health person, excuse me, on board because we feel that's a critical component of employee wellness. And so that is something that would be in the fall. So we have some candidates in the hopper for that, and may even those particular folks may it might work better actually for fall. So we'll bring you up to speed when we get there. Okay, so partners. So or maybe Kevin's explained to you that for the most cost-effective way for us to operate a health center, we need a certain number of belly buttons, and that means that we had to go into this with partners. So happy to share that we have our first partner signed on to open with us at the beginning of July, and we're just signing the agreements now. So I think I can say that that's VSAC. In Winooski, and so their employees are going to be joining us in the health center. We have between 6 and 8 other companies that we're working with at the moment for potential partnerships, and it just depends on where they are in the process. So they're on a spectrum of who's close to start potentially in July or August, and those who might take a little bit more time. And of course, with the pandemic, that has shifted people's priorities. Some people are more eager now to do it, and some are dealing with other things and they just don't have enough hands. But we're meeting with folks. I think even today there were 3 names that are 3 places that we're meeting with this week to keep moving them along the spectrum. So that was exciting to be able to get that. We'll finalize that agreement this week with VSAC. There's been a lot of work that we've done as far as workflows with employees and data feeds and all of this technical stuff on the background that has been done and is ready to go. So the health center has an electronic record that's on an app. So our employees, no matter where they go, will have their file with them that they can share with their primary care doc here or anywhere that they may be traveling. So that's been set up. And one of the really great things that part of the reason why we're doing this is for cost savings. And what we find when we're looking at our healthcare costs is that the things that cost us the most are things like cancer and diabetes and the big diseases, heart disease and whatnot. So with the health center, we're looking at wellness and coaching before folks get to those points, or if they have those areas might have been identified for them. So 2 of our 3 unions are required to have a biometric screening every year. That means having blood drawn and tests done, as well as height and weight and risk factors. In addition, our non-union employees, so all of managers, anyone not in one of the bargaining units, are also required to have biometric screenings. That's good for us because that means for the first 6 months that the health center is open, we will be strongly encouraging those employees to have their biometrics and have a health risk assessment done. That will give us a really good baseline as we move forward into calendar year 21 to talk about health coaching, how people change their behaviors, what sort of things they need to be doing, so that as we move forward, we can help reduce the risks, as well as perhaps those who are already in a risk category, perhaps we can start to move them backwards on the spectrum, or help them be compliant if they haven't been compliant. So one additional component that costs us a lot of money in healthcare is pharmaceuticals, as you might imagine, and partnering with Marathon Health. 2 things are happening within the health center. We will have a dispensary which will have 30 to 40 of the most common drugs that are prescribed, both for our population and things like antibiotics. If you go in and you're sick and you need Z-Pak or something like that, those will be in the dispensary. But in addition, because Marathon operates in 40 plus states, they have a contract for pharmaceuticals directly. So they get pharmaceuticals at a very low cost. And so that we would be able to pass along as we move forward into a different, perhaps the captive arrangement next year. So we're looking at ways to help control those costs, have lower costs both for the employee and for the plan. So we've been working through that as to what we want to be able to provide for our employees. And again, as VSAC comes on board, each of the partners are able to add to that dispensary. So if they have things that they need to have for their population, that would be there as well, and we would build that appropriately. So communications to employees, employees know that this is coming. Union leadership was sat in with the provider last week to meet her. So they've been fully engaged. This week, communication will again go out to employees saying that we've selected a provider and when we anticipate opening. And then there is a series. There are many communications that will be going out both at home and electronically and things in the workplace to make employees aware of what is happening. So, so I think it's really exciting. It's a way for us to start to tackle the costs of healthcare and make sure that our employees are in the best shape that they can be, and helping them with that support. And when we look at other health centers, you can see how this has worked over time. So I'm excited to see the effects as we move forward. So I think, unless I missed something, Kevin or Tom, I think that's it in a nutshell.
Well, it was a great overview. Corley,
Well,
thank
thank
you for
you.
all the work.
Were the hires local?
Yes, so folks were local, and she's actually working in central Vermont right now, and lives here in the north, but works in the Waterbury area. So
Okay,
Yep.
good. Any questions, anybody? Comments? Sounds good. Nice job.
Thanks, Corley.
Okay.
thank you.
All right, next item, item 12. Consider convening as the South Burlington Liquor Control Commission to approve the Hannaford Supermarket second-class license.
So moved.
Second.
All
Jim
in
seconded.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oops,
That
aye.
sounds like everyone. Yep. Say aye, yes. Okay, so we have one liquor license to approve.
I move that
Any
we approve the
discussion?
Hannaford Supermarket second-class liquor license.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Okay, let me just do a roll. Let's see. Megan,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Tim,
Aye.
David,
Aye.
and Helen votes aye. So 5 in favor of approving the Hannaford Supermarket's second-class license. Now,
I
motion
move that
to
we
fill.
come out of being the liquor commission, whatever it is.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now we move on to 13. Discuss the possible rescheduling of the May 18th public hearing on the proposed inclusionary zoning amendments to the South Burlington Land Development Regulations. So Paul, Connor.
Hi, Helen. Thank you. Well, given the council's interest in trying to limit the number of controversial items at the moment, not that this will necessarily be controversial, we wanted to just have a quick chat with you and see what councilors felt about either holding the hearing on that date and either taking action or not taking action right away, or having the hearing itself at a later date. And if you choose the latter, there's a couple different ways that we can do it. But I guess the first question is, would you like to proceed with the hearing on that date?
Well, it's Dave. I think in line with our most recent requests, especially to the DRB, it would be best if we, and most appropriate if we postpone that public hearing to a later date. That's my opinion. We have to, toe the line with what we've recommended and be one of the team. So I think that's what we should do.
Others? Any other, I mean, is everyone interested in holding off? I guess I have a question. If we do, well, either way, if we have the hearing and then ultimately approve on May 18th, is there a rush for this in terms of, if we don't approve it, then does it impact anything? I mean, certainly
Right. That's a great question. So the hearing was officially warned in the newspaper, I believe, the last couple days of March. Under Vermont law, the draft regulation is legally in effect pending your action for 150 days. So that's 5 months. So you could hold your hearing anytime between now and then, and it is in effect for any application that's submitted during that time. So it doesn't have a massive effect in terms of operations, whether you choose to have it on the 18th or you wait 2 weeks or 4 weeks, because it's still in effect pending your action. Does that make sense?
Right, so it is in effect for whatever they're discussing for O'Brien's development.
Assuming that they submitted their application at that time, yes.
At what time?
And yes, and for the next phase of it, yes, it would be in effect pending your action. If you do not take action within 150 days, then it would revert to the current rules. But 150 days would not be for 5 months from March.
Oh, so that's March, April, May, June, July, August. That's August, right?
Right. So you have some time there.
Okay, Tim?
So I guess my recommendation would be that if the council isn't in a rush to take action, that it doesn't have a massive material effect, other than folks wanting to know whether it's going to get passed or not.
Tim, did you want to say something?
I mean, I'm not in a rush.
Tom? Megan?
I think you just answered it, Paul, but you are recommending we push this off because we have comfort to do so, and there's not really a concern about it ultimately being adopted.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm recommending that if there's any discomfort on the council of holding the hearing in 2 weeks, there's no real material downside to doing so.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Keep going. I'm sorry.
So if that's the case, then you have a couple of options. One could be that you could use the emergency orders passed by the legislature to postpone it, or what might be simpler would be to announce on the agenda that the hearing will be open but immediately continued to a future date. That way we're not confusing people with there was something warned in the paper and then there wasn't. It might open up other legal questions. So what you could do is just literally open the hearing and say, motion to continue the hearing for until June X, and just go that way. And that way it's tidy and it's clean. And by choosing to do so
Is this
tonight,
controversial for anyone? Is it controversial for anyone? I mean, there's a part of me that, we heard it and it's been discussed for a fairly long time. So I think Megan and I had some questions and they got answered. I think when we met with Sandy and, excuse me, I can't remember. Is it Karen Plume? No.
Plumo.
Leslie.
Leslie Black Plumo. Yeah.
Leslie, yeah. So,
No, and that's fine. We have not received any feedback of folks expressing substantial concern. There were some concerns early on, but the Planning Commission worked those through with folks, and it was passed unanimously and without any significant opposition. People who'd love to see it be a little better from their perspective, but nobody who's opposed to it.
Well, I'm okay with holding the hearing May 18th. Whether that flies in the face of, what we've said, we're trying not to take really controversial issues, but I think this,
Well, we
my
can hold
sense
the
is
hearing.
it's been quite well vetted, so I would be surprised if very few people other than the people who support it show up at that meeting.
We can hold the
Tom?
hearing, and if we can hold the hearing, and if for whatever reason we don't want to take action, we can continue the hearing and then push this out. So it can't hurt to go forward with the hearing, and if we change our mind on May 18th, we just continue.
Well, I don't necessarily agree, because I think holding a hearing is doing something where we invite public participation, and we have opted not to encourage that until we figure out when we can appropriately do that again. So I think we're breaking our own policy, and I as long as Paul says it doesn't really make a difference if we postpone, I think we should push it off.
That's fine too.
Tim?
I'm fine either way. But, you know, we could have the hearing or we could just put it off. I mean,
It's
Barb had
two
her hand
committees
up.
have worked on it. So I just think we have to be sensitive to that too. If it's not particularly controversial.
I have to run and get a power cord.
Barb had her
Well,
hand
that
up.
could be controversial.
Helen, Barb has her hand up, or else she's just waving to us.
No,
Oh,
my hand.
Barb, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I tend to agree with David on this one. Now, I own the fact that I have been pretty outspoken about using, I mean, I use this technology. I come to your meetings. I'm really glad to be able to use it since I'm so far away. But I think that Roseanne Greco wrote a really, I thought, thoughtful piece to the DRB before their last meeting, and talked about the stresses that exist for people right now and not wanting to stretch them to a point that this could be the one that, not necessarily this one, but that an issue could be the one that really just sort of pushes them to their limits. And if this doesn't have to be done right now, I'm hopeful that the governor's going to open it by the middle of June, and that it would be better to do it when you could at least feel like more people might be comfortable enough, either with the technology, or that there might be the option for a meeting where some people could come and be present at a safe distance. And my suggestion would be, at least for a while, and I don't know what this does in terms of the technology, but I think if you could do meetings where people had the option to come either in person or by Zoom, would speak well to transparency and sort of sticking with the message that you created when you actually did it, for what it's worth.
Okay. Well, what's your pleasure, gang?
Let's postpone it.
Let's postpone it.
Okay, is this?
I'm happy to.
Postpone.
I'm happy to go along with the group.
We don't need to vote on this, do we?
Well, it doesn't say we're going to vote on it. It just says discuss the possible rescheduling.
So that's what we discussed. That's what we decided. Done deal.
Well, it doesn't
So
say we're going
what
to
we
take
would
action
do
on it.
then, what we would do then, probably the cleanest thing would be, Kevin, if you're okay with this, we would keep it on the agenda, but we would put in clear, bold type that the council is going to open it and then immediately continue it. I think that keeps the legal chain of it more cleanly alive than doing something where it gets rescheduled without it being open. That could open up a legal challenge to it, which we don't want to do.
Fine with me.
Okay.
All right, if
Then you can
that's
pick your date in 2 weeks' time as to when you want to continue it to.
okay. Well, and then we'll know better. And
Mhm.
maybe
Okay.
okay.
Thank you.
All right. So I don't think we need to vote on that, but that's the agreement that we'll have the hearing, but it will be continued. All righty. I think we already did item 14, reports from counselors on committee assignments. Unless anyone has anything else to add. So we go to other business, and this is the authorizing the bonding for debt. that
Yeah.
Kevin wanted to discuss?
Thanks,
with
Helen.
us?
I sent something to you, I believe, by email as opposed to in the packet because we missed the packet. Fundamentally, this is just authority for the city manager to submit an application to the bond bank for the additional debt we need for the improvements of 180 Market Street. The bond bank goes out into the market twice a year, and that's where we get our funding. We're not a big enough entity to go out into the market ourselves. And the summer round is coming up and the applications are due. We would need to have additional funding prior to the winter round that the bond bank goes through. And so we're coming to you now to authorize me to do this. Normally, I would have put this on a consent agenda because the public has already authorized this debt, but I failed to get it into the agenda at all on Friday. And so that's why we're doing this now. I asked Andrew about our ability to do this as other business item added, and all we have to, and he said, yes, we can do this, or excuse me, yes, you can do this. We'll just add it on to the agenda for your next meeting to ratify it. So this is a procedure that can be used for things that are left off, inadvertently left off an agenda. Anyway, the applicant, Alana's back on too, and she can correct me on this, but bond rates are good now, very good. And so it's a good time to be out in the market regardless, but we actually do need the money prior to the winter round of funding. And it's another $5 million, right, Alana?
Correct.
Okay. So I would ask the council to approve, authorize me to submit the application.
I have a motion. Okay, we got second.
I'll second. That's Megan.
Okay, is there further discussion?
Just to clarify, this is the 5 million that was already approved out of the $21.4 million on vote that the voters passed, what, 2 years ago? So this is just part of that debt. This is nothing new. It's all that's already been approved by the voters.
That is correct. We didn't go out for the full amount when we went out initially, Tom, because we didn't need it at the time. Well, now we're going to need it before the next round of the bond bank going on in the market. So we need to do this now. So, but yes,
because
it is
happening
by the voter.
We need it because construction is happening and we have debt lined, or we have to make payments lined up before the next issuance or the winter issuance.
Exactly.
Correct.
So is this going to be one of those bonds where they pay you to take the bond?
I don't think so.
Oh, that's too bad. Okay, so is everyone ready for the question? All right.
Wait, is there
oh.
any danger that the bond bank's going to have trouble selling the bonds in the first place? Or do they already have the money and then they're going to be loaning it back out?
So there was some difficulty in the market at the beginning of the pandemic. Since then, the CARES Act injected funds into the municipal bond market, so that's been stabilized. At least that's what the experience has been since then. So at least one state has gone out to the market in our region and has had positive results. But there is a lot of recognition that this is a very unusual time. And so because of that, normally the bond bank would not meet with their pool of applicants before going out. You know, they would just do their due diligence and all the legal work. This time they will be meeting with the pool of applicants more than once prior to entering into the market to make sure that everyone's comfortable and understands where the market is, and that that it's a good idea to go into the market.
And you feel like it's a good time to go in the market, you and Kevin and Tom?
They seem to have, they feel that the market is both stable and has very favorable rates. But that being said, they want to keep a sharp eye on it. And I think that's, I think we want to too. And we're not committed until not in May, we won't be committed. We won't be committed until much closer to the actual issue. So they won't go in until they feel comfortable to go in.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you ready for the vote? Okay, Tim?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Dave?
Aye.
Megan?
Aye.
And Helen votes aye. So that passed 5-0.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there any, actually, I'm glad we need it because it means we're continuing building the community center.
You got a nice elevator
Um,
shaft there right now.
Yeah.
Or is it two elevator shafts?
Is there any other business to come
Well,
before this?
I could just
Are there
raise
any
one
pictures?
question. If
Okay.
that's all right. How long do we envision just going on like this? Meeting online versus getting back to distance meetings in person. Do we have a timeline on this at all? I mean, personally, I think you all know, I don't think I can meet in person for an indefinite period, but, and I'm fine like this, it works great. But do we have any idea when, I mean, what triggers the change back to, gee, we go to City Hall and sit 10 feet apart or something like that? I would have said.
Well, I think that's up to the governor.
6 feet's not enough, so. Kevin?
Isn't that up to the governor allowing, more than 10 people in one place?
I don't know.
Yeah, I think we have to wait until the governor's amends his executive order again and allows this to happen, Dave. And I don't know when that's going to be.
And then we can then decide, do we do that right away or push it off a couple more weeks and how we go about it? And that's how it'll work?
Right.
All right, fine.
And I agree with you, though. I hope when we do go back to meeting in person, regardless of where we are with, COVID-19, I really appreciate this format and for people to be able to, I mean, I don't know how you do this in person, but it would be great to have this format so people can really participate and not be at the meeting. Have to be at the meeting.
I love meeting like this. All these meetings are catered. I'm eating really well during.
I agree. Hey,
Okay.
Kevin, we record all these, right?
We do, yeah.
Yes.
As
Yep.
does Channel 17.
And so people can go back and watch.
Yep.
In this
You're
semester at school, it works fine.
Your almost 81-year-old secretary also appreciates this.
Thank you.
Hey, Helen,
Okay, so
speaking of which, before you close, you've had a couple of people recently join by telephone, so I'm not sure if you wanted to, I'm not sure who they are,
Okay.
but if they had anything that they wanted to add
I
to any of these
didn't-
items.
thank you. I was trying to look and is there anyone on the phone who would like to make a comment or let us know who you are?
Sure. Can I be heard?
Yep.
Yes, you are. We hear you. Yes.
I wasn't sure if I was muted. It's Sarah Dopp here.
Oh, hi, Sarah.
Hi. I'm not sure where you are in the agenda. I was interested in item 13 about the possible rescheduling of the May 18th public hearing.
We are past that, Sarah, and what we determined is that we wanted to put that off, and the way to do that was to continue the scheduling of the open meeting on May 18th, but make it very clear that the meeting or the hearing will be continued till there's a time when we can have more in-person public
Okay.
participation. And we were told that it does not affect anything in the works at the moment.
Okay, I appreciate that feedback. I will just take a moment to say I've only been on less than 5 minutes, and I heard Dave Kaufman say that you know, he liked this format and it was working so well. I can barely understand you guys, just for the record. It sounds shaky to me and very far away, and I'm having trouble distinguishing your words. So it actually isn't working that well for me at this moment.
Okay.
Is that on a landline?
It is a landline.
I can hear you perfectly clear.
Oh, that's good. You know, I'm not saying it isn't a good idea going forward to have this an option for people, but I'm not sure it's unalloyed success either.
Okay. Yep.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. It's just not very
No,
clear,
I'm just
the words. It's not
okay.
the
This is
volume,
This is Sandy Dooley. I was calling in, letting you know I was on. So I guess you got way ahead on the agenda.
We did. I sent you a text.
Okay.
Tell you that, but
Okay. Anyway, I can hear everybody crystal clear, and I'm on a cell phone. So anyway, I guess everything's different. And Sarah, you sound as clear as a bell, but everybody else sounded really great too.
Huh, okay. Well, maybe it's just me.
okay. Anyone else calling in who wanted to make a comment? Did you raise your hand, Barb?
I did. I just had a question. Are they, for those of us that aren't there, Tim was talking about the elevator shaft. Are there pictures somewhere of the progress of that project?
Oh yeah.
Where do I find them?
Are
they on the city website?
So yeah, Alana's got some up, and I'm going to move some to the front page here shortly. And Alana, if there's a shortcut, we can move them there.
Is the spy cam there already? Is it still going?
Yeah, yes. So the camera is still there, and you can also see time lapse on the camera.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how do I get to that?
If you go
Watch
to
the screen.
I'm watching.
If you go to residents, city center, TIF.
Got it.
Then go to the, actually, if you just go up to the top, Paul, and select the, not that one, but go to TIF district projects and library. Right at the top.
Senior Center and City Hall.
The green box is the camera.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I should have known. You guys think of everything.
If you click on it, it takes you to some cool stuff.
Thank you.
It looks like the Provincetown Monument, but it's not.
Okay.
So, our
I
next
just wanted to
item
say
is,
one other,
Oh, I'm
could I
sorry.
say one thing? And that is, I just wanted to say I'm glad that the library is going to start with curbside service
That's great.
on Wednesday. That's wonderful.
we think so too. Thank you. Do we need a motion now to go into executive session and we won't be coming back? Or do we adjourn and that's a whole nother meeting?
Adjourn and then do it, Helen.
Okay. So I have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second? And all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So we back out of this and we call the next number. Is that correct?
Can you just say what that number is, please?
It's in an email.
Well, wait till we hang up, Dave. Everybody take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Kevin,
You
do they
gotta
need to make a motion to go into an executive session?
Yeah, they do. They need to move now to go into executive session to discuss real estate matters where premature public disclosure would put the city at a competitive disadvantage.
So moved. This is Megan.
Second. Just some discussion real quick. I'm pretty sure, yeah, Paul, you sent a meeting request. And so I just want to make sure Dave knows to look in his calendar to find the link. I don't know if you sent the link to the new meeting out in an email, but you can copy it out and send it out right now in case that helps.
Yep. I can do that. If folks need it, I can resend it right now.
I seconded it.
Why don't you do that, Paul?
Okay.
I've got it right here. I'm fine. Thanks. I got it on the email from earlier.
Okay. Let's go to that meeting then.
All right. Go to a different meeting.
Do we need to vote on the executive session thing or?
Oh, yes. Oh, let's assume that it did pass because I think you have run out of people.
Very good. Bye-bye.
Bye. See you shortly.